So it's official. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children are now known as Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. We all woke up yesterday surprised that the announcement was made because Lilibet had her christening in Los Angeles, well, in Montecito with a Los Angeles Archbishop, which I don't even know if that exists. But anyhow, that was yesterday. So we had a live event where we discussed all this because it was very exciting news, although confusing considering Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are like saying that they're, saying all kinds of things about the royal family. But what we failed to discuss was the fact that many of the Queen's grandchildren do not have titles and they never had titles. So I made a mistake in my enthusiasm yesterday waking up to the news. I woke up and I was like, what? I was so surprised that officially they were prince and princess because of all that's going on with Harry's Netflix series and Meghan's Netflix series, Spare, his psychotherapy session online. Like, why now does he want his children to officially have those titles? And I made some comments like, well, they technically are royal, so of course they would be prince and princesses. And with my enthusiasm and my shock, I failed to discuss the fact that many of the Queen's grandchildren do not have any royal titles. So we're going to talk. Hello. We're going to talk about that today. I am DEANNA from Hot for History. Thank you for being here. Please do subscribe. Please share. I'm live. We have, I think it's super thanks or super chat or whatever. And so we appreciate any of your help. So the question was, I basically said, of course they would take the titles. I'm excited about having sort of a pseudo-American prince and princess child, like babies. Isn't that cute and fun? But at the same time, they did get to decide. They did get to decide. They don't get to decide whether they're in the line or not. But they are royal children. But why would the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who have left their royal duties, who have left to come to America because Harry said he needs space and he needs to be away from all of that, and because they want their worldwide privacy tour, why then do they also want their children to have the prince and princess titles when so many other royal families and so many other royals have not? So what we're going to discuss today is a little bit about the history of the royal grandchildren who have not taken the royal titles. Here, let me fix this so you guys can see this better. This is currently the line of succession, which starts with the Prince of Wales, Will, his son, George, then there's Charlotte, then there's Louis. Okay, so back in the day when the Queen was having her children, the rule was that the royalty would go, or the line of succession would go to the male children, right, first. So it would have been, and for her kids, it would have been Charles, Andrew, Edward, and then Anne, even though Anne was the second born. So she had a daughter named Anne. That's the Princess Royale, who's amazing. Like, she does all kinds of things. So when we look at this, we have to look at the whole list and see. So we have, and then I think it was just a few years ago, she changed this so somebody like Charlotte could be in the line. So she changed it for the favor of women, like the women can be queen. Charlotte could be queen if George was not available, and all of that. So, but this line will represent the males who were born before that rule went into place, right? So Prince of Wales, because he's Charles' son, George, the grandchildren. Then we have Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Then it's listed now Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. So in spite of everything going on in the world with what they've done, they're still in the line of succession. And that was sort of what I was getting at. But they don't have to take the titles. They don't have to keep the titles. They could have opted for something that Anne did, or even Prince Edward did, with not naming their children with prince and princess. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So then we have the Duke of York. We have Prince Andrew, who was stripped of a lot of some of his titles, but he is still in the line. And then Beatrice, then you can't see it at the top there, but Beatrice's daughter, Eugenie, her son, and she's having another one, which will boost everybody down. Then we have Edward, the Earl of Wessex, Viscount Severn James. That's the youngest grandchild of the Queen. Lady Louise Mountbatten Windsor. I don't know if she's 20 now. I have to see. And then we have Anne, who was the second daughter, Peter Phillips. So now look, the Earl of Wessex, the Duke of York, they did not, well, the Earl of Wessex, Edward, did not name his children Prince and Princess. Now, technically, when Lady Louise turned 18 or when James turns 18, he is allowed to request the title of Prince or Princess. But so far, she has not requested it. And the reason is that these royals wanted to raise their kids without that pressure and without those titles. So then we have Peter Phillips, who was Anne's first son. So the first two grandchildren of the Queen, which was Peter Phillips and Zara, because in this list, it's Peter and his two daughters. And then Mrs. Michael Tyndall, which is Zara Phillips, would have been the second grandchild. They didn't even take the name Prince and Princess. And then we have her children. So that's kind of the foundation of that. And just to keep in mind, guys, hold on a second. Let me change this page. Yeah, just to keep in mind that, like I said, they could have taken those titles, but they didn't. And the way that it works, the reason why Archie and the reason why Lilibet did not have that title, those titles to begin with, was because the titles of Prince and Princess don't go to the great grandchildren. They just go to the grandchild of the monarch. So his grandchildren, you know, are the three with Will and then the two children with Harry, right? But they could have refused the princess and prince title. So we're going to talk about that. I'm curious as to what you guys think about Harry and Meghan being this couple that basically has sort of dissed the royal family, but they're taking the royal titles, the prince and princess title, and Will could always take that away. Those titles can be taken away. So is it advantageous for the children living in America, you know, all of that, away from the royal family, to have those titles? Like, what is the goal? Okay, so why didn't Princess Anne give her children, Zara and Peter, the first two grandchildren, titles? So Princess Anne has been amazing since she was born. She's the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, very close. Anne's the only sister of King Charles II and has been the Princess Royale, which is one of only 7 to carry this title since 1987. Yet Anne has never been one for titles, and especially not for her children. So last month, for example, in September, it was the first time that a female royal was allowed to participate in the Vigil of the Princes, meaning like during the funeral procession, she put on her military garb and she marched. And she was also there when her mother passed away. So very close to her mother, which means the first two grandchildren, Peter and Zara, were very close to the Queen, but they were not known as Prince and Princess. So the titles that are interesting for Princess Anne, just so we know, she is an admiral in the British Navy, a general in the British Army, and an Air Chief Marshal in the Royal Air Force. The princess participated in many of the funeral proceedings, and she was with the Queen when the Queen died. So she's very, very close. And in a nutshell, she does not go for gossip, self-promotion. She makes the most royal appearances out of anybody. She goes on tour and does that. She visits charities, hospitals. She hands out plaques. I mean, that's her thing. And she does hundreds of those every single year. But she did not want to give her kids those titles because she wanted them to have their given names so that they can, because she said there's downsides to titles. So this is wisdom. So her decision seems to have benefited everybody. I mean, her daughter went on to, be in the Olympics as an athlete, and her and her husband have a podcast. He's a rugby player. She was getting tattoos and piercings before anybody because she just had her own freedom. She was just her own girl, right? And that was the same for Peter. So the lack of royal titles it wasn't a problem for Peter, who's 17th in line, and Zara, who's now 20th. if they ever ascended to the throne. So that was that. So they did not get titles. So my question is, why is Harry and why are Harry and Meghan grabbing the titles? And is that something that you guys agree with? Like, should they take the titles, or is it just, it doesn't really matter? It's just a matter of preference. Maybe King Charles was into having his grandchildren make sure that they had the titles. Like, we don't really know, but there is a philosophy and a theory, obviously, from some of the royals, and Princess Anne is very well respected, that if you get the chance, do not have the royal titles. And many people are saying now that there should be a rule that if you're not active in royal duties and you take your children to America and raise them as Americans, maybe you shouldn't give them the princess title, and maybe they shouldn't have it. Okay, now let me read here. It just feels like bitter divorce pettiness. Meghan trying to get the last shirt off their back, metaphorically, and wanting the titles for the children. Harry is just going along with her. Yeah, I mean, that it does kind of seem like that. It's like, why? The big question. I mean, yesterday I'm like a romantic, like I'm idealist. I want reconciliation. I want, these children to know their birthright. They are in the line of succession. I mean, romantically, it's like, oh, it's such a great idea. They're prince and princess. But practically speaking, with the reality of the world and what we know, number one, it's difficult to be raised as a royal. But for them, it's really just sort of a title at this point, because they're not wanting their kids to be involved. They even Meghan and Harry refused to go to, this makes me so sad and sort of mad, did not go to the Queen's like Christmas event. Like one of her last family Christmas events, like I think a couple years ago, they didn't even go. And they had to have known at her age that she was near the end, right? And did not go, refused to go. Okay, so let's say, I understand it's hypocritical, but if they want their kids to have their birthright, I don't think Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice that is very true. I mean, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, like, they work regular jobs. They have regular gigs. Like, they're not necessarily active either. So I don't know. I think I've come to the conclusion that it's just kind of a preference. And I guess you could raise your kids as prince and princess and still not have them be, have the pressures of being in the, kind of the pressures that being a royal would have, So I think you're probably right in that it's hypocritical, but if they want their kids to have it, yeah. Okay. So sadly this, okay. So now, sadly this make targets now. Sadly, the children are going to have enough problems. Yeah. And we'll just see. I mean, I think they want to make sure that their children are out of the limelight and protected. Like, they're not showing their faces very often. But then they give them the princess title. It, just like Theodora said, it just feels hypocritical in a sense. And yet, does it really matter? I don't know. So Zara basically said that she was happy that she was not raised. She said growing up as a commoner allowed Zara to thrive as her own woman. This is what Anne said. And there was never pressure for her to conform. So Anne was sort of a rebel in her own right. And yet Anne was able to kind of have that balance of being somewhat naturally rebellious and kind of sassy, but very respectful of the crown. And I think that that's Zara too. Like, Zara and her husband, they're kind of edgy. I love them for that. But, they also respect the crown. So Zara said, Papa said to me, if you want to get to the top, you've got to do it properly. And if you want to stay at the top, it's even harder. They were given really kind of traditional advice on how to kind of function and work through life. So, okay, you know what, guys? What do you think of Prince Edward? Because honestly, I think he was the one that got the best looks out of the entire, all of the kids. I'm just saying, I know now he looks very different than he did back then, but I know that he was like Philip's favorite. He just was so nice. Even Diana, I think, had a crush on him at one point. He ended up marrying Sophie, I think, right after Diana passed away. So now the Queen's youngest grandchildren are Lady Louise and Viscount Severn James, right? And they are young. I mean, I don't know, maybe James is 18 now, but they're young. They're in college or nearing college. And they don't have the names. And this is Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth's youngest son. It says the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and Farfar have two children, Lady Louise and James. But here's why they aren't princess or prince. So they would have been, there were kind of plans to streamline the monarchy even back when they were born, like, almost 20 years ago. But they just wanted their kids to have a regular life. Sophie said in an article in the Sunday Times, we try to bring them up with the understanding that they are very likely to have to work for a living. And Edward has had to work. Hence, we made the decision not to use HRH titles. They have them and they can decide to use them from 18, but it's highly unlikely. So there's a chance, as I mentioned, that they could use those titles, but they probably won't. Edward also rejected the chance to have a duke titled when he got married in 1999, opting to be an earl. Princess Anne's children also don't possess titles. So this is, basically what I was saying yesterday. I kind of made a comment. I was like, well, they're prince and princess. That's just who Lilibet and Archie are. They are prince and princess, the way that we see it. But as far as whether they take the title or not, it doesn't matter. They will still be royal. They'll still be in the line of succession. But there's an argument where they're trying to say, hey, maybe it's not the best thing for the kids. So all of these monarchies around the world are like, hey, let's just stop with this. And so I wanted to mention 14. Well, you have to count, like, some of these that I'm talking about are like in doubles. But anyhow, royals who have lost or declined their titles. This was published a while back. And so Princess Diana and Sarah, they were princesses. We still call them princess. Although I think we call Fergie more like Duchess of York, whatever. But they lost their titles when they got divorced. So, and then Harry and Meghan were stripped of their Royal Highness status, their HRH status, after they stepped down. Obviously we call him Prince Harry, but their HRH status was gone as of January 20th and in 2020. And Harry also lost his royal military titles and charitable patronages. It was very sad to see him not able to, march in this, in the funeral, all dressed to the nines in his royal attire. Of course, he was when he went in with his cousins, but it was kind of sad to see, especially since he did serve. Yeah, that's a good question. Although we're going to have to dive deep into that because that goes back to some deep history. Can we take a defective monarchy back to Hanover to get a refund? So, what we're basically saying is, maybe they should get their act together. I don't know. I think when monarchies change, there's a lot of drama. Aren't the Wessex looking for the Duke of Edinburgh? Okay. Yeah. So they're looking for the title, like who's going to take Prince Philip's title, the Duke of Edinburgh, which I think the king, Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth really wanted Edward to have it because Edward worked really hard with Prince Philip and he works in all of those charities but now what we're hearing is Charlotte might be given this honorary title as the Duchess of Edinburgh, which would be like a huge honor because the Queen had that at one point. So I'm not sure what we're going to see, but yeah, so that's that. All right. So Edward VIII, he also, obviously the Queen's uncle, never lost his HRH title, even after he left from being king and ended up, marrying, Wallace Simpson. So he maintained his HRH status. He was forced to abdicate before his coronation as British monarch, head of the Church of England, which back then did not allow divorcees to remarry if their ex-spouse was still living. Edward was demoted to the title of Duke of Windsor and was forced into exile. Okay, then Prince Philip lost his titles. Now, he was like the Prince of Greece and, I don't know, Denmark, something like that. And when he got married, he was given basically Prince Consort title. He wasn't given the king title. He was demoted in a sense. Obviously, he was given a great, wife and family and authority, but it was hard for him because he was very royal. He was a prince, so he had to renounce that. Princess Anne, as we know, refused the title for her kids. Now, this one's interesting. Prince Michael of Kent, who's the Queen's cousin, he had to forfeit his line of succession to the British throne when in 1978, he married Baroness Marie Christine von Reibnitz, who was Catholic. So British royals have not been allowed to marry Catholics since Henry VIII. He went around England and just like burned down all the Catholic churches. So then he was 15th in line to the throne. In 2015, however, he and his children were reinstated and the prince is now 52nd in line to the throne. Okay, and then moving to another country, the grandchildren of King Carl XVI, Gustav, Queen Sylvia, they basically took away the royal titles for all the grandchildren because it's like, hey, it's too much pressure to live that way. And then Princess Meiko of Japan wanted to marry this guy, Kei Komuro, and they took away her title, and she lives in New York City, and they're just kind of doing their thing. So titles can be taken away. And I know that in the beginning of this, basically, like yesterday, I was so like, what is happening? They're prince and princess now. But now, what I did not mention, guys, was the fact that there's been precedents for them not having titles. So the big question is why? And again, I think Theodora makes a point because I was thinking the same thing. Maybe it's okay, like for them, not to, basically take those titles. But the question is, why are they taking it? Or it's okay for them to take the titles and maybe not be in England. I don't know. One of the best choices for Charles in the 70s was Catholic. That was, yeah. I mean, this is a brand. Ooh, girl. Hello. I think that had South Park made their episode after this announcement, that would have been a really great point. But what happens to these children psychologically if they're like, you're a prince, you're a princess, and in America, like, we're going to eat that up. You know that they're going to eat that up, and you are right. It's a brand, not a title. And then if William becomes, the king, which he will, and then they lose their titles, like, what's that like? So I don't know. I just wanted to make a point of saying and correcting what I said the other day, which was like, well, they're just going to be prince and princess, regardless of whether they officially give the title to them, because they are royals and they're in the line of succession, and they are. But so many people are saying, with all that's been going on, they don't even live. I don't think any of the rules the parliament ever thought to make a clause. If you move to America, if you move to another country and decide not to be royal, yeah, maybe you don't get the line or, whatever. But that doesn't exist right now. So they kind of have to go with that. So the truth is that they could pick not to. They could opt out of it, especially considering the fact that they are exposing the royal family and all of its flaws. Well, there you go. Okay. Any other thoughts? Does anybody have any other opinions about Harry and Meghan and their kids being prince and princess before I go? In closing, I will say that it's very conflicting. It's confusing. It's exciting because those kids are really cute, at least from the backs of their heads, from what we can see, their profile, from whatever we can see. They're very, very cute. The whole idea of having these little American, royals is exciting. But why? Like, what's the point when people like Princess Anne, who's raised two amazing kids, that she has all these grandchildren, Prince Edward, they're like, no. why? Like, whatever. I mean, so that's the big question. They could have chosen not to. And especially in their case, because they're acting like they hate the royal family, why did they choose to call them prince and princess and keep that? Why didn't they say, we don't need the titles? It seems hypocritical. Absolutely, 1,000%. So anyhow, please guys subscribe to Hot for History. We are going to head into some deeper dives into many things royal, and we're heading into the coronation soon. So we are witnessing history. We are witnessing history. I do hope that Harry accepts the invitation. I do hope that they end up living in Buckingham Palace, because that would be fun. At least when they're in the UK. But have a great day, and we will talk to you later. Bye.